Hello, everyone. I am starting the year in an amazing way. I'm starting 2024 with Enterprises Dr. Phlox himself, John Billingsley. Hi, John. How are you doing?
I am fabulous. Thank you for having me on.
Happy New Year,
Happy New Year to
first
you.
of all. So just to start the year with a little bit of gratitude, how was your 2023? What was the highlight of your 2023?
The
Anything you're grateful
highlight,
for?
the highlight of 2023. Another year without my wife saying I want a divorce.
Hey, I
I
feel
think
that. That's a plus.
anybody who is married can understand that to get through another year where you haven't been kicked to the curb is no small accomplishment. So,
And
um,
you've been married for like 30 years or something,
we've
right?
been together for 25 years.
Oh,
We've been married for 23 years, and we've been happy for 19 years. That's a little
I,
joke that my wife could cheerfully never hear me tell again. I often think that, I can almost trace to the day my wife suddenly was like not laughing at my jokes anymore. It's like about the midpoint of our marriage. It was like, okay, I've crossed a Rubicon. No
it's a
longer
matter
funny.
of finding new jokes. That's the thing.
Ah, well, there you go. There you go. I'm too old for new jokes. It's just putting a spin on the same old jokes. I'm very grateful that the Hollywood Food Coalition, which we'll talk about doubtless in a bit, is doing as well as it is doing. I mean, obviously, we respond to need. So,
Mhm.
I can't be happy about the fact that the need demands that we exist, but we have helped and have been helping more people than ever in the last year or so. We are now working with 150 other not-for-profits to help buttress and augment their meal programs, and we continue to serve a great hot meal every night of the week. So that's a big part of my life. I'm very happy for that. We have two wonderful kitties who I adore. One
Aw.
is sitting in front of me right now as we speak, and they're just marvelous and beautiful.
A library is not a real library if you don't have some cats roaming around.
Exactly. And yes, and that is actually probably another thing that I'm grateful for. I love to read, and at the end of every year, I always keep a list of the books I've read and some small notes that I've made about those books, and I kind of do a little summing up. And I just did that this morning, so it
How many
reminds.
books did you read this year? I'm a literature teacher, so I
Well, it depends upon how you count them because there are
Mhm.
a number of books I will read twice.
I
So
feel that.
probably read about 55 books, but I've probably read maybe half of them twice. So probably 100 reads, I
Twice
guess.
in the same year? You will read the same book
I'll
twice
read
in
a
the same
book
year?
back to back. I'll read a book,
Mhm.
finish it and then start it again. Nabokov famously said the only reading is rereading.
I
Um,
agree with that. I do leave some time between rereading because I want to see how much I've grown and what I can
okay.
catch that is
Well,
different.
certainly there are books where you go back years later and you pick it up in an entirely different way. Although I find
Mhm.
at my age now, I go back and read a book a second time, and it's like I have no memory of having read it the first
I
time.
don't believe you. Come
No, it's true. True. I read the Brothers Karamazov again recently in a relatively new translation, and I know I've read the Brothers Karamazov, and I couldn't remember a damned thing about it. It's like, oh no, no, no.
I don't count reading new translations as reading twice the same book. I'm a classicist, so Latin
Oh,
and
okay.
Greek, and I've read the new translations of the Odyssey
Yeah, so
or
yeah,
the Iliad, and it's
yeah.
like reading a new book, so I don't count them as twice.
Well, I think that's probably, I mean, they're the oral tradition, so I think there's a
Mhm.
lot more, a lot more latitude for a translator to take either one of those texts off in a lot of interesting directions.
Mhm.
A translation of Dostoevsky, I'm not entirely sure I'm reading a new book. I'm reading a version of a Dostoevsky novel that might emphasize the spoken word perhaps a bit
Mhm.
more. I think
A new
some.
tech.
Yeah, a new take. I mean, I think particularly with the Russians, I think a lot of the people who translate to Russians are basically looking for what was the vernacular. And it's
Can't
really
feel that.
hard. Constance Garnett. I love it. I never get to talk about this kind of shit. This is great. Constance Garnett, the woman who used to translate all the Russians, she was a very prim Victorian woman. And so she'd translate these Russian novels, but they all sounded like they were English governesses having tea.
Mhm.
to read now some of the contemporary Russian translations, and they're much bawdier and dirtier and, infinitely more like,
Yeah, I know that as myself working on translation from, ancient Greek to French, for example, it was always the question of like, what I can't make the text say so many things,
Yep.
and how do I take my bias out of like what I
Yeah.
want to read in the text out of my translation, and that's what I like with the new trans. We're totally going over.
Oh no, this is great. How many people are actually on your show where you spend this much time talking about translating literature?
I interviewed two writers that write for IDW,
Uh-huh.
and Jackson Lansing is a huge fan of everything that is Odyssey and Ancient Greece, and we actually talk about the
Okay.
Odyssey for like half an hour.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, translation is fascinating, and I grew up actually watching Star Trek in French,
Uh-huh.
and when I watched it in English, I was like, this is like watching a new show. I'm
Now,
watching
I have to ask you, are you a Mary Renault fan?
Mary Renault?
Yeah, Renault. Do you know her?
No.
Okay, I think you'd really like her stuff. She wrote a lot back in the 60s and 70s, and she wrote about ancient Greece. And she was a very, very good novelist. Mask of Apollo. Oh boy, it's been a long time since I've read any of her books. But for
Mary
anybody who
Renault.
who loves that, that world, um, she's and she wrote a great book. Oh God, what was it? She wrote a couple of books about Alexander, a book about his childhood, and then a book about his the I want to say it's the Praise Singer, about his exploits in Persia, and particularly his relationship with a young boy who he takes as his Persian lover. It's all
Oh, yeah, I see
all
that.
narrated from the boy's perspective. Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous book set in that world.
Oh, okay. Well, it's on the list. More books to read for 2024. So
Exactly, exactly,
there's
exactly.
always more books. I realized the day when I was maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9, and I realized I would not be able to read every single book that were at the local library.
Oh yeah, oh
And,
yeah.
it's,
No, I when you think about all the good books, and I mean not talking about the crappy books, but the good books that are written every year, you couldn't scratch the surface of the surface of the surface of the surface of the books that are written in a particular year, much less all of the books that are.
and
I
then I discover things from, because I learn new languages and then I access new books.
yeah, I can barely handle. I mean, I do read a fair number of books in translation, but unfortunately, I didn't stupidly as a kid pay attention to my teachers who said, you're going to regret if you don't learn another language. At the
Never too
time,
late.
it's like, but all I want to do is watch the Mets on television and chase girls. I'm sorry.
Which,
Stupid,
we've all been
stupid,
there.
stupid. But I do kind of feel like for me, having books around, it's like if you live in a library, books will yell at you to read. But
Hmm.
it's not as if choosing to live in a library is based on the idea that you're going to read all the books.
Oh
You're
no.
going
Oh
to read
no.
a
You
fraction.
have books that you have, and then there are books that you read, and then there's books that you browse, and then there's books that you research. There's
Yeah.
different kind of
And
books.
and
Yeah,
there's books that I know I have, but I can't get to them, so I buy another copy of it, which is really the sickness.
it
That's
happens.
yeah. I don't tell my wife I told you that because that's I finally saw her eyebrows go up. It's like, what do you mean you buy books you know we already have? It's like, oops,
But then
whoops.
you can give them to people. That's also what I do. I was like, please take the book.
Yes, that is exactly right. Actually, one of the things I do every Christmas for our family, Bonnie's family, is I put together a big box of dollar books from the bookstore, and then they all pick through. So everybody goes home with a stack of 5 or 6 books. So many great books in the world.
So many.
Yeah.
So speaking about a new year, new list of books, you are going to be very busy in January with your charity work. Less time to read, I suppose.
Yes, well,
And
the busy part, fortunately, is behind me because the hardest part of Trek Talks, which is the event we throw to
Mhm.
help raise money and awareness for the Hollywood Food Coalition, takes place on January 13. The hardest part of that event, which is, for those who don't know, an 8-hour Jerry Lewis-esque digital telethon with around 50 to 60 amazing Star Trek guests, panels, interviews, what have you. Um, the hardest part is getting the guests. So that work is November, December. So we finally
Mhm.
got our last guest, Doug Jones.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yep. The next couple of weeks, it's about helping, we have a team of 15 or so people to get the word out and just make sure that the show is as tight as it needs to be in terms of the technical stuff. In between the panels, we have interstitial videos about the Hollywood Food Coalition. We just have to make sure that all the material is ready. But the hard part is behind me.
How long have you been working, giving your time to charities? Is that something you've always done? What
Summit.
sparked it?
It's something I've always done. It's something I did a little bit as a kid. Although I suppose probably, I mean, one, if you're an actor, some part of you, I think, is drawn to the work because you're interested in community. The nature
Mhm.
of acting is it's a team oriented, action. And you feel like particularly if you're a stage actor, you're putting work forward that is designed to help a community speak to itself, learn how to talk to itself about commonly held values and concerns. So although I didn't ever do that thinking that was a charitable pursuit, I did always feel like there was something about the nature of that work that was, I won't say altruistic, but that was community centric. In that sense, I think you can't not be community centric if you're an actor. Um, Social service work, I probably began to get into maybe about 25 or 30 years ago. And part was because I was a poor actor. And so I knew what it was like to be hungry. Not hungry, hungry. Not in the sense of, I always knew I would have enough to eat, but in terms of gulp, not only am I going to be able to pay my rent, but tuna fish again, how much stretch can I get out of his $10 bill? Which grocery store is going to serve free samples? And I was on food stamps, did get unemployment assurance. It was always about, scraping.
Mhm.
um, I have been very blessed in that I got to enjoy a certain amount of career success after I turned 40. But until I turned 40, I rarely made $10,000 a year.
Yeah,
Um,
I actually we talked for fundraising before for the entertainment community fund that you helped us raise money for. Yeah, and I my mom was a Doctor Without Border, and she would always say when your job is human centric, you need to keep giving because this is what you do.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
so I feel that.
yeah,
And
yeah, exactly. And I just also, I mean, the, the Hebraic expression that virtue is its own reward. I find that to be true. It just feels good.
Mhm.
It feels good to be doing things that are helpful to other people. The alternative is that you're going to go to bed at night feeling kind of sour about yourself because you didn't do much. At least in my opinion. I mean, that's obviously not true for everybody, but generally speaking, the selfish part of me that just knows I'm happier when I'm doing things that feel like they give value to the community as opposed to not.
So why the Hollywood Food Coalition? There are many different
Sure.
organization working to support people food wise or like even with their daily expenses.
Yeah.
Why this one?
For me, it was because I loved the nature of the volunteer ethos as practiced on the ground. There are a lot of organizations, a lot of charities that if you want to volunteer for them, it's 17 pages of paperwork before you're allowed to move a paperclip across the room.
Hmm.
This place, the first day I showed up, I was making fruit salad and washing dishes and helping behind the stove and getting to know the people who were coming in. There was such a great, wonderful communitarian ethos. It felt like a theater act. So I fell in love right then with the way they just operated on the ground. And that reflected, I think, the way they related to the people they served. They really operate, and we really operate from a very, I think, moving place. People come to us, sometimes it's the only meal they're having all day. I love the way we relate to our customers, our friends. How are you? May I help you? What would you like today? Would you like a choice? We can offer you vegetarian, vegan, or carnivorian options, a green salad, a fruit salad, kind of dessert. We've also got other organizations here. Can we introduce you? Can we help you? I know a lot of organizations do wonderful things. This just felt so personalized to me. That was the initial appeal. And secondarily, I'd be disingenuous if I didn't say this. It was an organization that I felt needed me in a big way, because as wonderful as it was, they didn't really quite have their hands around the question of what does the future hold? What does it mean to grow? And how do you survive? It was an all volunteer organization. They were surviving on around $100,000 a year. They had two part-time drivers and a part-time kitchen manager, but we weren't able to pay our chief cook and bottle washer. So in essence, we had no executive director, no development staff, and no sense of what it was we were going to be able to do in the years ahead. To me, that was a door that I could walk through. I'd been
Hmm.
on boards before, I'd helped organize things before, I'd run a theater company before. I think a lot of what one is looking for when one volunteers is how do you kind of go in fast and hard and become part of it right away? And two, where can you use the best part of yourself, the biggest part of yourself? And
Your
that was,
talent, what you're good at, right?
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And that's an odd talent because it's not the talent that people would associate with me. I'm an actor first and foremost. But I started a theater company and I helped to found an acting school, and I've done my time in boardrooms too. And that was something that I thought I could use right away. My experience would be of value to them.
So if people want to support the Hollywood Food Coalition, they can watch TED Talks on January 13th, right? And they'll
January
be able to
13th.
donate money.
Yeah,
Can they also donate their time? Is that
yeah,
something that?
absolutely. If you're
Mhm.
if you're in LA, so January 13th, absolutely 10 in the morning Pacific to 6 in the evening Pacific. And you can go to trektalks.net for more information. If you are in Los Angeles, by all means, come and volunteer. You can help cook, you can help serve. We rescue 3 million pounds of food a year out of what we call an exchange space. And this is a program my wife and I helped to found. The idea being that we try and provide concierge level service to other not for profits to help buttress and augment their meal programs. So we find out specifically what their food needs are and try and match them with what our donations are.
Mhm.
So we need people in our warehouse every day helping to process, mulch, cull all the food that comes in and to help get it out to all these neighborhood groups. You won't,
A cat.
yes, he has a massive and attractive rump.
So I think this event will be passed when we air the video, but I'll talk about it during our live show this Thursday. So this weekend, you're also volunteering for track against pancreatic cancer, right? With the companion.
We are going to be on the companion show on the
Hmm.
6th, and that is, yes, my mother passed away from pancreatic cancer when she
Sorry.
was 70, and from diagnosis to death, 2 months. Pancreatic cancer is one of the worst cancers when it comes to, survivability rate. Fortunately, in large part because of the work of this wonderful group called the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, which raises money and awareness for the cause, uh, the survivability rate has increased dramatically. 11% more people who are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer are living a minimum of 5 years after diagnosis. And Kitty Swink, who is one of the members of the Star Trek team, Track Against Pancreatic Cancer, I believe is the name of our team,
Hmm.
um, along with her husband Armin Shimmerman and Jonathan Frakes, whose brother passed away from pancreatic cancer, and Juan Carlos Cotto, whose brother Manny Cotto was one of the showrunners on Enterprise, have all come together to help support this effort. There's a walk that takes place in the spring called Purple Stride. So after I segue away from Hollywood Food Coalition and after Track Talks is over, I'll continue to support the Hollywood Food Coalition. I'm on their board, but I will put a little bit more effort into helping to raise awareness for the work that PanCan does. And we're all appearing January 6th to talk a bit about it on the companion.
We're close friends with the company, and we worked with them on several initiatives. We'll make sure to be here the weekend,
Fabulous.
and yeah,
Fabulous.
they're fantastic. Um, so that's your beginning of 2024, Hollywood Food Coalition, the PanCan. You can have the TED Talks.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I'm the chair of the development committee for the Hollywood Food Coalition. So a lot of my work is to try and kind of help make sure that our board
Hmm.
does its share of the heavy lifting to support the wonderful work that our development directors and our executive director do to raise money. So throughout the year, I'm always busy, but everybody on our board has particular things that they're sort of engaged in. My big lift is Trek Talks. So I get to take a little bit of a little bit of a
A little
breather
bit.
after it's over, and which I will look forward to because December has been very busy. Um, but it's a year long, not we something I'm really proud of is 37 years we've never missed a night of service. And the work of a not-for-profit when you're out in the community helping people, it never stops.
Hmm.
So there's never really a complete day off. I've often said if you kick me awake in the middle of the night at 3 in the morning, and you say Hollywood Food Coalition go, I can spiel. Elevator pitch. You want the elevator pitch? The Hollywood Food Coalition was born in night. Yeah.
No,
So
I think it's important because especially after the pandemic and also after the strike, we've seen more people wanting to give time, wanting to give money, being
yeah,
here for ready to support initiatives. But again, there's so many opportunities that, being able to say, here, this is
yeah,
good
and
people, good
it's
work.
it's funny. Two things. One is because I also like to answer the question of, well, why give to you? You're in LA. Why not find something closer to home? Sure,
Hmm.
because absolutely. There are wonderful organizations doing amazing things all over the world. And I don't think it's ever about, you know, and I don't think it should ever be about for any not for profit. Hey, give to me because I'm inherently better than A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Some of it is you're looking for your volunteeristic bliss. You're looking for what organization does things that really appeal to you. For some, that's going to be, what people do on the ecological front, or what people do with refugees, or what
Absolutely.
people do with the prison systems, or what people do with school systems, yada, yada, yada. I will say that one thing that I'm very proud of that I think we are doing that I'm hoping we will continue to do better and better and better is we're working with other community groups to try and figure out what are the systemic problems related to hunger that it takes a village to solve. As a for instance, food becomes available to various community groups. Say grocery stores are
Hmm.
told, as is happening in California, they have to rescue more of their food. They can't put it into the dumpster. That doesn't necessarily mean that a whole bunch of community groups have figured out how to get it, how to store it, how to refrigerate it, how to transport it, how to get it to its end users effectively and quickly, how to stay in touch with each other to make sure that they're all participating in a process by which the information is available to all. That kind of collective response and that kind of collective thinking is one of the things that for me, when I got involved, I wanted to keep emphasizing. We're a coalition. We should be involved in helping Star Trek, right? A federation of change makers come together to figure out how these problems can be best effectuated collectively. And that's one of the things that I think is part of what we do that is really important to me.
And I think many people wants to see change. I think these last years have been difficult for everybody. I speak
Yeah.
of my own experience. I live in San Diego.
Oh, yeah,
We
you
see
do. I didn't know that. Yeah, I know San Diego very well. My dad lived there for many, many years.
so I go back and forth to I was actually in Burbank this morning. I just came back,
Oh,
and yeah, and we see a lot of people in the street here. We
yeah,
see a lot of people that don't have access to amenities, don't have access to food, and it's true that there's now, I think, a push, especially from Trek fans, because I think it's one of the values that the fandom tries to uplift,
exactly.
to want to give their time and want to give their money. But there's also a fear of not being effective, of a fear of not being able choosing the a right the right thing for themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's good to spiel and it's
Well,
good to inspire.
the other thing I kind of feel, I mean, honestly, to me, what animated me was when Trump won.
Hmm.
I sort of felt like, to me, what he represents is something so dark and negative and unkind
Hmm.
that I thought, the only thing that I could do was to figure out some way to do more myself to feel like, well, maybe what Trump has unleashed in many people is more kindness in response to his cruelty.
Hmm.
And going into another election year where this negative, dark spirit arises again, I think it continues to ask of us as citizens that we find ways to respond in opposition to what he represents, not just on the political front, which is, of course, vitally important, but in terms of what we do to give back to our communities. There are things that, to me, people can do without having to join a
Hmm.
group. Let's, for instance, take food. One thing that I've often encouraged people to do, which is something that my wife and I did for a number of years, is call 10 of your friends and say, hey, I'd love to come pick up a couple of bags of groceries to take them to a local church food bank. Would you be game for that? And then just spend one day driving around town. You've got 20 bags of groceries at the end, and you've also connected again with 10 people that maybe you haven't seen in a while. Stop and have a cup of coffee or a donut with each of those groups. You'll be over caffeinated by the end of the day, and you'll have gained 5 pounds,
We
but it'll
already
be
are.
worth
We're
it. Yeah.
caffeinated.
Yeah. And then if that works, maybe the next time you say, hey, each of those friends, would you be willing to call 10 friends of yours and do it yourself? Because that would mean that that next whack at it, you've now got 10 times 20 bags of food. You've now got 200 bags of groceries that can go to a number of different church food pantries. To me, sometimes we're looking for a group, for a pre-existing organization. And if we don't find it, we say, well, there you go. But there are all sorts of things you can do along those lines. The same principle, but with toys or books or clothing.
Hmm.
You know, the need is great. Self-motivating and using your network of friends, one, reconnects you with people in your community, which is never a bad thing. And two, takes away this sense that somehow there's this entity that has to, give you permission to activate yourself, which I don't think is true.
I know that with the pod, we try to, activate people.
Yeah,
And it's a nice thing to go to do all together, like be the change that you want to see in the world, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. And a guy named Robert Putnam wrote this book many years ago called Bowling Alone, and he was well in advance of, all the internet hoo-ha. But he basically said that there was a time when we just were born into this warp and woof of expectation, communal expectation. We'd belong to a church. We'd be expected to be in a bridge club, the PTA, or bowling league, or yada, 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 yada.
Hmm.
As we become more atomized and isolated, some of that necessary social lubricant that only comes from face-to-face contact with people on a regular basis kind of begins to slide away. And I think a lot of what volunteerism is about is getting away, and I say this, of course, to somebody who's a podcaster, so apologies, getting away from the screen and getting back into the world. I mean, ideally, there's a balance. It's amazing what this allows us to do. I
Hmm.
can talk to you in San Diego. I'd never even met you before. But the idea that there's a community that you have to step outside to participate in, I think is really important.
No, it has brought to like we met a lot of our I mean, people who became our friends with our listeners, and that we meet, at convention. I try to travel to go see people. It actually brought me a community that
Yeah.
I see face to face. Also, no, this is true. Um, it's almost time. Before we part ways for now, we'll be
Yes.
here on January 6th with the companion. I'll be in the audience. Um, a book recommendation before we leave.
Well, book recommend Hidden Valley Road. Hidden Valley Road, and I'm gonna forget the name of the guy. I wanted to say his name is Kuttner, Robert Kuttner. It's a wonderful nonfiction book. I read both fiction and nonfiction. It's a wonderful nonfiction book about a family, 12 kids, six of whom were schizophrenic. And the life of the family over a 30-year period, and particularly how the younger children, the daughters in a family of all boys, became the caretakers. So it's a lot about gender, it's a lot about mental illness. It's a gorgeous family saga. It's about the 60s and the 70s in America. And it's also about the history of schizophrenia and how the nature of schizophrenia and mental illness generally, the stories that were told in our last century, slowly evolved and changed and frankly became less misogynistic. For many, many years, if a kid was schizophrenic, it's because his mother was a bitch. And
Hmm.
that was the story.
I'll pick it up. I'll let you know. And
Very good.
so everybody, please go support John's initiative January 6th with tracks against pancreatic cancer, and January 13th, track talks for the Hollywood Food Coalition. Anything else? Where people can find you?
I'm Jay Billingsley 60 at that horrible thing that what's his name runs. Which I'll be honest with you, I don't do social media. I stayed on that platform because I only use it for charity. So there's a part of me that feels like I don't want to leave
Not
because,
lose the connection to people, right?
but he's become such a nut job.
I feel you.
He whose name I will not speak. And I don't do Instagram because I'm not particularly adroit when it comes to posting visual imagery.
Hmm.
So anyway, yeah, at J Billingsley 60, but I don't check it as often as one might.
Well,
Um,
well,
yeah,
thank you so, so much.
no, pleasure.
I wish you a very, very happy, very productive, very full of discovery 2024, John.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure. Lovely to meet you.
Bye.
Bye.